Welcome to the Inspired by Adventure podcast, bringing you the adventure across the airwaves. Here's your host, Cole Watkins.
All right, welcome to another episode of Inspired by Adventure podcast. My name is Cole Watkins, and thank you for joining us today. Today we have David Gegg joining us. David is the owner of Meyer World Adventures and the land agent for the Belize Aggressor III and IV. How are you doing today, David?
I'm doing great, Cole. Really good to be on board with you guys for this event.
Yeah, it's great to finally meet you. I've heard a lot of good things about you, and this is the first time you and I have got to talk. So I'm interested to learn about you and also learn today a little bit about the history of Belize, because from what I hear, you and your family have been there for a really long time, right?
Well, that's correct. We traced our ancestry in Belize to 1756.
Wow.
That was long before my time. Had nothing to do with it. But I was born in Belize, as was my dad and his dad. So we've been here a long time. Interesting history over the years, especially with the aggressor operation. But to give you a bit of background, I went to college in Kansas City, of all places, from a tropical climate like Belize. And after 4 years there, I headed home, and I guess I realized the potential that Belize had for tourism when compared to Kansas City, of course, which is a place I enjoyed being, but a little different. So despite the fact that my family was in merchandising, when I got back to Belize in 72, I said, I've got to launch a career in tourism. And my first venture actually was a dive camp on St. George's Key, which is just off the coast of Belize City by 9 miles, but just inside the Barrier Reef. And that's really got what me going in tourism, and especially in diving.
Very cool. And so was your family divers as well, or were you the first one to kind of get into that?
I was the first one to get into scuba diving. I mean, we spent a lot of time growing up on the St. George's Key, the place I talk about. So we were all swimmers and snorkelers. And of course, back then, spearfishing was the way to go. So we had quite a bit of experience with that sort of thing. But then after college, I knew that scuba diving was the future and jumped into it. And I've been at it ever since. And pleased to say that I actually facilitated the first Belize Aggressor in coming to Belize. I believe that was 1986.
Wow.
And it's a great organization, and happy to be a part of it.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how your operation is tied in with Belize Aggressor III and IV, and some of your daily tasks that you guys have to do and get ready for our customers.
Well, we meet all the people arriving at the airport, get them to the yachts on time, get them back to the airport. But additionally, Belize has such a diverse landscape on the mainland of activities and attractions, including the Maya ruins, that very often we're providing pre and post tours for your guests. And I think that's one of the big attractions for Belize, the fact that people can book a week on board either BA3 or 4, but either prior or post the dive trip, they can spend a few days on the mainland, taking in the sights. And we've got tremendous attractions from the Mayan world, sites such as Lamanai, Altunja, Sanantinich. Some people will even take a trip across the border into Guatemala to go to Tikal. And of course, I'm talking pre-COVID.
Yeah.
But Belize does offer a tremendous opportunity of land-based activities. One of the signature tours is called cave tubing, where you can actually tube down a river through a series of caves that are really, really cool. And at the end of that, we have a zip line operation where you can zip, across several lines, including 2 lines that span the lengths across the river. So that's really kind of cool. And it's just a lot of very, very scenic places and lots of great things to do.
I can attest. I got to do the cave tubing when I was in Belize 2 years ago, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Pretty.
it is.
pretty chilly water, but I loved it.
Well, it can be, but once you make the first dip, it usually warms up quickly.
I agree. I agree. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Maya ruins and hear a little bit about the history of Belize, because that was something that I went down there on my trip, and I knew we were going to make a trip over to Alton Ha. That's where that's the ruins that I got to see. But I didn't realize just how many there were down there, and how far it's spread out. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, you would have gone to Alton Ha because on Friday when the yachts get back in, usually by midday, the afternoon is available for some type of tour activity, and Alton Ha is the nearest Mayan attraction to Belize City, where the yachts are based.
Mhm.
It's only 32 miles away, so we do a half day tour in the afternoon, which gives you a chance to really see that site and to appreciate it. But there are many more sites in Belize, and that's why pre and post packages that are 2, 3, 4 nights sometimes are so attractive. Because if you wanted to see St. Antonich, for instance, which is in the very west of Belize, or Lamanai, which is a very interesting site, but requires getting there by river, with the services of a boat.
Mhm.
And of course, the river itself is a big part of the attraction in getting to Lamanai. And there's several eco resorts in and around the country, where people would stay and spend 2 or 3 nights and visit the ruins, and then of course do the cave tubing or zip lining or the national parks. Over 42% of Belize's land area is designated as national parks or reserves.
Wow.
So
40,
tremendous part of set aside.
did you say 42%?
42%. That's correct.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah. And I mean, that's really good, because I think it shows what governments have done to protect the forest and the jungles and the parts of Belize that need to be protected. And we've become famous as an ecotourism destination for that very reason.
Do you have do you have a certain favorite of the ruins that you tend to go to or appreciate more than
Wow.
the others, if I had to put you on the spot?
They're all different and each unique in its own way. Most of the ruins are large pyramids, which are really interesting. I like Lamanai because to get there, you've got to go by boat. And the river trip is really, really cool. I mean, you'll see crocodiles, you'll see howler monkeys, lots of bromeliads, orchids, all kinds of really exotic plant life.
Hmm.
So Lamanai is really, really cool. One of the sites I like is Cajalpech, and that's because it's somewhat different to your standard pyramid style ruin. And Cajalpech was apparently a site where the Mayan rulers lived. And you can see at that site the different rooms and parts of this structure that were used by the royalty of those days as their living quarters. And that kind of makes Cajalpech to me a little different and sets it aside from some of the others. But I mean, they're all special. I mean, St. Antonich is the tallest structure in Belize, or maybe the second tallest structure in Belize.
Wow.
And you climb to the top of St. Antonich, and the views are spectacular. And there are lots of carved, stelae and other features into the side of the temples that really make it a spectacular place to be.
That blows my mind that something that was built that long ago can still be, one of the tallest structures in the country.
Very, very true. Very true.
Yeah. So when do you happen to know when they can date these ruins back to?
Yeah, they can. And I mean, in the Mayan world, you've got pre-classic, the classic period, and post-classic. And I think, each one of them represents a different period of time. But of course, the Mayans had this practice of building new structures on top of old structures. So, it's quite likely that the initial building that maybe under St. Antonich, for instance, was built in the classic period. And St. Antonich itself is probably and I'm guessing now probably post-classic. But I mean, we know that different buildings were built at different times, and representing the different eras of the Mayan civilization. There were also tremendous cave dwellers, and I mean, Belize has lots of really beautiful caves that you can visit, and in most of these caves, you'll see evidence of the Mayan civilization. Usually, lots of very large pots, all kinds of artifacts that would be evidence of their habitation of these caves so many years ago. I mean, one of the features you'll see a lot is carbon on the ceiling of a cave where the ceiling is low. And I mean, if you just touch that carbon, your fingerprints will sort of impact it. And that's because they would burn things in the cave for light, to create food, to boil water, and so on.
Okay.
And frequently you see tripods, where they would have put huge pots and used those fires within the caves to sustain themselves.
Wow. Do you happen to know the date of one of these ruins? We talking 1000?
I think we're talking anywhere from, well, of course, the Mayan civilization dates back to just before BC. I mean, there's some evidence of Mayan sites 200-300 BC. But of course, most of what's in Belize today, I would say, is 600-800 AD up into 1400 AD. 1,000 to 1,200 years after Anno Domini.
Wow, that's insane. That's something that long can still be in that type of. Of
course, there are lots of ruins that have been taken over by the jungles, and when they're found, the first thing that archaeologists will do is attempt to clear the area around the site so they can analyze it properly and look at where major findings might be. For instance, at Altunha many years ago, Dr. David Pendergast was the archaeologist working that site, and he found a tomb which they excavated, and that's where the jade head, which is the largest piece of jade that's been found in the Maya world, was actually found within a tomb at Altunha that they were excavating. And I mean, that jade head is said to be one of the most valuable pieces of Mayan artifact in the world today.
I remember learning about that a little bit. Now, how big? Can you remind me how big that is?
Yeah, the jade head is actually, it fit into my hands like this, actually. And I say that because I had a very unique experience of attending a trade show in Berlin with the Minister of Tourism at the time. And he took the jade head and quite an elaborate Mayan exhibit to ITV in Berlin, where he and I were participating and representing Belize. And I remember having that jade head in my hands and taking pictures with it at the show in Berlin, and that was really quite an experience.
Yeah, it's pretty well known down there in Belize. I remember seeing it on different signs and different things talking about it. So that's really cool. I'm sure that was a real treat for you, huh?
Yeah. I mean, the jade head is sort of iconic to Belize and to the Mayan world, and it's one of the most famous finds historically. And we're certain that there is another jade head out there somewhere, because so many Mayan sites are yet to be excavated, many of which are still lost in the jungle somewhere. And I would imagine that there's some sites that have not yet even been found.
Wow, that's really cool. Are there any operations that are actively, searching or doing these?
Yeah, well, I don't know if they're searching. Usually they're found by log cutters who encounter them when, they're hiking through the jungle looking for chicle or mahogany logs or something like that. But there are many ongoing excavations at some of the different, more famous sites. Although I think COVID has kind of put a stall to most of that activity. But, one of the main sites in Belize is Caracol. And that's a site that's a little further away than most of them. And you definitely need to do an overnight trip to access Caracol. But it's one of our largest sites, and it's said to rival Tikal in Guatemala. In fact, a bit of the history is the fact that there was some kind of war at some point between Tikal and Guatemala. Sorry, not Tikal, between Caracol and Tikal. And Caracol actually prevailed in that battle. So, it makes it a very important site in the history of the Mayan world generally, but of course, especially in the history of Belize, given Guatemala's claim to Belize. So, we tend to rub the victory of that battle in their face from time to time.
It's very interesting stuff there. Well, what else can you tell us a little bit about Belize? We recently did a call with TASA, which is the Turnoff Atoll Sustainability Association.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. I want to make sure I didn't mess up that acronym, but yeah, and it was very interesting learning about everything that they do over there at the Turnoff Atoll. What can you say about the diving and the shoot? I'm gonna have to rephrase this question. I was trying to get.
Well, let me go first, Cole, to Lighthouse Reef.
Okay.
And the Blue Hole, because that's what makes Belize so famous. And actually,
sorry, let me phrase the question for you. Since I screwed that part up, I'm gonna have to cut it out. So let me rephrase it for you, and then it will look smooth when I mash it together.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more about the ocean side of Belize and a little bit about the Turnoff Atoll and Lighthouse Reef. What can you tell us about those areas?
Yeah, well, Belize has 3 of the only 4 atolls in this part of the world. There's Glover's Reef that is a bit in the south and off the coast of the Barrier Reef. Turnoff Atoll, which is very, very important as a major ecosystem. And of course, so is Lighthouse Reef. And Lighthouse Reef is east of Turnoff, and Turnoff is east of the Barrier Reef. Barrier Reef is the second longest in the world. It's 186 miles long from the southernmost end to the northernmost end, and it extends into Mexico and into Honduras as well. But one of the iconic features of the system is the Great Blue Hole, and that's a site that we've known for many years existed, but was made famous really by Jacques Cousteau, who came to Belize in 1971, I believe, to carry out some research on the Blue Hole. And he came here with the Calypso and was able to actually get the Calypso into the Blue Hole. And at the time, I think he had some mini subs of that era. And he did go down to the bottom. And I remember them saying that it was 412 feet deep and approximately 1,000 feet in diameter. And they were actually able to extract a stalactite and bring it ashore. And I mean, that was a good thing because they were able to do a lot of research on it and to date everything that had happened in the area. But I mean, clearly with stalactites in the Blue Hole, it's an indication that those atolls and the Barrier Reef and the inland waters of Belize were very much above sea level at one time. So, you talk about climate change today, and I think we've had tremendous climate change or sea level change over the years. And I had the very unique pleasure of getting to meet Captain Cousteau and the entire crew of the Calypso. Actually was able to spend an entire day on board the Calypso. An experience I'll never forget. He actually came back to Belize on a second occasion to conduct research on the spawning of the grouper species here in Belize, because we have several areas in the country where at certain times of the year the groupers come together by the thousands and spawn. And he came to do some research on that. And it was on that occasion that I got to spend the day on board the Calypso with Captain Cousteau and the Madame and the full crew. And like I say, that's one of those days in my life that I'll never forget.
And that was in the 70s, you said?
Well, I think that was the second time he came back to Belize, which I believe was 1973. And an interesting anecdote about that trip as well. John Denver was on board the Calypso with him.
Really?
On that occasion. And if you recall, he wrote a song called I Calypso. And that song was written by John Denver here in Belize.
Wow.
And I actually got to meet John Denver as well on that occasion.
Very cool. I'm sure many of our diving fans would like to ask what it was like to hang out with Cousteau for a little while. Did you guys do some diving together, and what was he like?
Well, actually, we did. And I mean, I'll tell you exactly kind of how it happened. My dad at the time was the honorary French consul in Belize. And of course, with Calypso in port, he felt obliged to host the function for Captain Cousteau and the crew, which he did. And we got to talking the night at that event, and a friend of mine knew where there was this massive 16th century anchor on the west side of Turniff. And of course, the speculation was that anchor was placed there probably prior to a storm or hurricane, and that maybe the ship had come loose and sank and gone down over the drop-off. So we decided to head out the following morning and to anchor in that same area. Of course, first to find that anchor and then dive the drop-off to see if there was anything there. And we did find the anchor, and we did dive on the drop-off on the west side of Turniff. Didn't find anything, but it kind of got late. We really weren't able to do justice to that dive. But I did get a chance to dive with a couple of the crew guys from Calypso. About 4 or 5 of us from the city joined them on that trip and was able to dive with them.
Well, what was he like, just getting to see him in person? Because every
really cool guy, so knowledgeable, entertaining. I had started my career in scuba diving and having a chance to spend a day sailing from Belize City Harbor, right where the Aggressor boats dock, out to Turniff with Captain Cousteau, having lunch on board with him. Like I said, it's one of those experiences I'll never forget. I mean, the guy was so interesting, educated, informative, always willing to share his experiences with you. I took away so much from it. And like I say, it's one of those moments in my life that I'll never forget.
That's very cool to hear. Well, do you want to talk to us about any of the other atolls that are over there?
Yeah, of course, Turniff is a really cool place as well. And, we've now got TASA, Turniff Atoll Sustainable Association, that's doing a really great work at Turniff. I mean, it's a conservation sort of agency, but they're more than just conservation. They've got activities such as growing coral. Turniff is an incredible place, so many different ecosystems, such a large footprint of mangroves, for instance. And of course, like Lighthouse Reef, the atoll is surrounded by coral. But in the case of Turniff, within the lagoons of the atoll, you'll see manatees, you'll see crocodiles, dolphins, just about every imaginable species there is. And TASA has rangers that are deployed throughout the atoll with a view to ensuring that there's no abuse to poaching, to fishing for certain species in the times of the year when they're not supposed to. Mm-hmm. And that helps to preserve all the species that are so prevalent there, such as lobster and conch and some of the other, pelagic species as well. Snapper, grouper, for instance, there are several places at Turniff where the grouper will aggregate at certain times of the year. And the guys at TASA have a research station, and they're really doing just, all kinds of great work. And as you know, Cole, Aggressor Adventures has helped them in a significant way, and we're happy to do so, and will continue to do so, because they are doing great work for sustainability, for not just for Turniff, but for all the atolls and the barrier reef of Belize.
Yes, I'm really glad you mentioned TASA, because we did do a call with Valdemar Andrade there with TASA earlier in the season of when we started our podcast, and that's a great call if anyone wants to go listen to that call and learn a little bit more about TASA. It was really great stuff. Well, tell us a little bit, David, about the diving in Belize, and what you would tell someone who's never traveled there, why they should come there and check everything out.
Well, the first reason is because, we're so close to the primary market, which of course is the US. We're a 2-hour, well, in the case of Miami, it's about an hour and 35 minutes, 2 hours out of Houston. And actually today we have nonstop flights from LaGuardia, from Chicago, from Denver, and from Los Angeles. So the airlift into Belize is very convenient and easy. And, it's a short flight away from the primary market of the United States. We're an English-speaking country. Belize used to be British Honduras. We emerged in history as a colony, and then we got independence in 1981. But the people still speak English as their mother tongue. A lot of influences from Spanish-speaking countries today, but English is still the official language of Belize. You land at the airport, and the yachts are 15, 20 minutes away. Depending on whether you're doing a pre or post package, or whether boarding the same day, you can fly in on a Saturday morning, and by Saturday evening, you're departing the dock and heading off for a great week of some of the best diving in the world. It's the second longest barrier reef in the world. Mm-hmm. The barrier reef itself has good diving, but Turniff and Lighthouse Reef and Glover's Reef are said to be quite a bit better, each different in its own way. But Lighthouse Reef, which is where we spend most of the week, is said to be as good as anything you'll find in any part of the world. And I think even Cousteau declared it as one of his top 10 favorites. So the diving is excellent. We've got drop-offs, we've got walls, lots of marine life, lots of sharks in certain parts of the systems, lots of great things to see. And of course, with the Aggressor fleet literally anchored over the reef at night, there's great night diving, great opportunities for people. And as we know, Cole, the liveaboard options provide the best type of scuba diving anywhere, and give you a chance to put in 5-6 dives a day, and you really can get the most out of a liveaboard dive vacation. And that's true for everyone, but especially for the really serious divers.
I agree. Yeah. Well, is there anything else you'd like to tell us about Belize before we wrap it up here?
My goodness. Well, we've done exceptionally well, given the COVID pandemic. We've got extremely good protocols in place at the international airport. Everyone who's now operating has to do so with what's called the gold standard. And I must admit that you guys, the Aggressor operation, ourselves as your land agent, we achieved the gold standard status when it first became available. And we have put in place all the necessary protocols of, testing and whatnot to ensure that you can come in and be safe while you're on board. The crew has to take extreme protocols also to ensure that they're safe to accommodate your guests when they're here. And I mean, touch wood, we've had no incidents at all. Belize just lifted some of the regulations it had in place for travel, but prior to that, you'd have to get a test before leaving the country. And we actually had people who carry out those tests come to the boat on Friday afternoon and provide the tests, and everyone's been good. And then, you get your documentation, and normally you leave the following day. And it's really been smooth process for everyone coming out and then leaving the following week. We've had no issues. And I think, guests are really impressed with what Belize has in place to accommodate them traveling here.
Our recent customers who have been on these boats, been on the yachts and noticed the how quick and efficient the testing and smooth, like you said, as it goes when they come and do the test at the end of the week, they're raving about how easy that process is. So that's been really a relief of how we were able to get that going. I'm excited that's going so well.
And let's hope, Cole, that within a few months, this saga will all be behind us, and that the world can get back to normalcy, and we won't have to go through all this testing, on the way in and on the way out. I think we're slowly getting there, and hopefully by summer, that's where we'll all be.
Yes, sir. I hope so. Well, I really appreciate you coming on today, and I look forward to meeting you next time I'm in Belize, which is actually supposed to be this summer. So I know you and Liz do a great job, and the rest of your team out there. So tell everybody I said hey, and we'll see you soon.
Will do. Look forward to seeing you whenever you're here. Just give me a little heads up that you're on the way in, and I'll take you to some of those Maya ruins.
Oh, that would be awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today for episode of Inspired by Adventure podcast, and we will catch you guys next time. Take care.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks for having me. All right.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning into the Inspired by Adventure podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you haven't already, please subscribe through iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. See you next time.